presentation on implementing MTSS to support students during school reopening. My name is Marion Creighton, and my colleague Lucille Sleger will begin our presentation with an overview and a description of one of our visuals. Lucille?
Hello. Most Part B grantees have a statewide tiered system of supports, although they have varying names for the frameworks and may use a state-specific term rather than MTSS. States can look at these frameworks and determine if adaptations are needed to support returning students. I would like to direct you to the purple box on the bottom of the poster. You will see information about a three-tiered MTSS model, and I will reference it during this presentation. It has two strands, an academic strand and a social emotional strand. A state should look at each tier within each strand to determine if adaptations are needed. Why should a state begin with an existing MTSS framework? Because it will be more efficient to use an existing framework to support accelerated learning when school reopens instead of creating something new. And federal supplemental funds can be used to improve an existing system. A state should work with stakeholders, including parents, to determine how the state can modify the existing framework. If necessary, state leaders and stakeholders may go to the exploration stage of implementation science method to determine which adaptations are needed. The SEA and stakeholders should look at what worked during the pandemic and also look at where students are now. Appropriate stakeholders should identify evidence-based practices to establish a strong core curriculum to support accelerated learning for returning students, and tiers 2 and 3 should be linked to the core curriculum. Stakeholders should look for practices to reach, involve, and teach all students. Be aware that there will be challenges to implementing and sustaining the MTSS framework. It is important to provide ongoing training for teachers and school staff to help address the staff turnover issue, which is a challenge to improving and sustaining an MTSS framework. It is important to analyze tier 2 data for the group, not just the individual. If 80% of the group is not responding to the intervention, consider changing the intervention. In general, link MTSS practices to student outcomes. It is important to ensure that the tiers are not just placement levels, but levels of support and interventions. And now Miriam will talk about implementation science method.
Thank you, Lucille. And so as we were thinking about which implementation science method we wanted to use, we decided on the active implementation frameworks of the State Implementation and Scaling Up of Evidence-Based Practice Center, or what we call the SISIP Center. The purpose of the SISIP Center is to help establish implementation and scaling capacity in state, regional, and district educational systems. And so as we look at local teams in schools, they will need to discuss post-school closure needs of students and educators, and what usable interventions or evidence-based practices will meet those needs. Then at the state, district, and/or local team level, they will need to decide what it will take to adapt existing systems or to adopt new systems. They will need to look at areas such as competencies, drivers, such as what kind of training is needed for the educators, or organizational drivers, such as what infrastructure is in place so that the MTSS system paired with the active implementation frameworks will be used throughout the state, as well as leadership drivers. What statewide initiatives are needed to make the adaptation or adoption of a system work. Also, as existing systems are adapted or new systems are adopted, teams will make database decisions in a part of a plan, do, study, act improvement cycle. As new evidence-based practices are utilized and utilized with fidelity, there will be a need for the various level teams to reconvene to look at whether or not they're reaching the intended outcomes. And now I turn it back to Lucille.
I'll talk about the takeaways that are listed on the poster. The takeaways have links to information which you may find helpful. There are resources that address the importance of using data and relevant data sources for making database decisions, the importance of prioritizing the health, safety, and social emotional needs of students, educators, and families, while promoting behavioral and academic growth for students, and the need to address the needs of all students. There are also links to federal emergency relief funds resources. Marian?
All right, and as we wrap up, we know that this was a poster presentation and you did not have a chance to ask questions. So if there are questions that you might have about this presentation, please feel free to reach out to Lucille at lucille.slager@ed.gov. And she is the multi-tier system of support lead for OSEP. And I am Marian Creighton. So you would reach me at marian.creighton@ed.gov. I am the implementation science lead and the correctional ed co-lead. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.